The desire for a Jewish homeland is a story that stretches back through many centuries. For nearly 2,000 years, since the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem in 70 CE, Jewish people were scattered across the globe. This long period is known as the diaspora. Despite living in many different lands, they held onto a powerful connection to their ancestral land, the land of Israel. This connection was a central part of their prayers, their culture, and their identity. The phrase, "next year in Jerusalem," was not just a hopeful saying, it was a deeply felt expression of a collective dream to one day return to the place they considered their spiritual and historical center. It represented a longing to end their long exile and re-establish a sovereign life in their own land. Life in the diaspora was often marked by great uncertainty and frequent danger. Jewish communities in Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East faced waves of persecution. They were often treated as outsiders, subjected to discriminatory laws, and forced to live in segregated areas known as ghettos. In places like Russia, violent mob attacks called pogroms were a constant threat, leading to immense suffering and forcing many to flee. This history of relentless persecution created a powerful argument for a safe refuge. The idea grew that the only way for Jewish people to truly be safe and control their own destiny was to have a country of their own, where they could be a majority and defend themselves from hatred. In the late 19th century, this ancient dream began to transform into a modern political movement. This movement was called Zionism, a term derived from Zion, another name for Jerusalem. A key figure in this transformation was an Austro-Hungarian journalist named Theodor Herzl. After witnessing the intense anti-Semitism surrounding the Dreyfus Affair in France, he became convinced that assimilation into European society was impossible. In 1896, he published a book called Der Judenstaat, or the Jewish State, which laid out a practical plan for creating a homeland. His work inspired the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland, in 1897, which formally established the goal of creating a publicly and legally assured home in Palestine. Following this, small but determined groups of Jewish immigrants, known as Olim, began moving to Palestine, which was then part of the Ottoman Empire. These early pioneers bought land, often arid and swampy, and worked to make it fertile. They established agricultural communities called kibbutzim and moshavim, laying the groundwork for a future society. They also revived Hebrew as a modern spoken language, a crucial step in building a new national culture. This period, known as the First and Second Aliyahs, was filled with immense hardship, but it demonstrated a practical commitment to turning the Zionist dream into a tangible reality on the ground, long before the world powers would formally sanction it. The situation for Jewish people took a catastrophic turn with the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany in the 1930s. The persecution that followed was systematic and brutal, culminating in World War II and the Holocaust. This event was a genocide of unparalleled scale. The Nazis and their collaborators murdered 6 million Jewish men, women, and children. They were systematically rounded up, forced into concentration camps, and killed in gas chambers. This horrific tragedy nearly destroyed the vibrant Jewish communities of Europe. The Holocaust served as the most terrible and convincing proof that Jewish people needed a sanctuary, a place where they could be masters of their own fate and secure from such unimaginable horror. After the war ended in 1945, the world was left to grapple with the devastation. Hundreds of thousands of Jewish survivors were left homeless, living in displaced persons camps across Europe. Many had lost their entire families and communities and had no homes to return to. For these survivors, the idea of returning to the lands where their families were murdered was unthinkable. Their plight created immense international pressure to find a solution. The Zionist cause gained powerful moral weight, and the argument for a Jewish state in Palestine became more urgent than ever. The world could no longer ignore the desperate need for a safe haven for the Jewish people. At this time, Palestine was under British control, governed by the British Mandate established after World War I. The British had struggled for years to manage the growing tensions between the Jewish and Arab populations. Jewish immigration had increased, and so had Arab opposition to it. Exhausted by World War II, and unable to find a workable solution, Great Britain decided to hand the problem over to the newly formed United Nations in 1947. The UN was seen as a new international body that could mediate difficult global problems. The fate of Palestine, and the people living there, would now be decided on the world stage, marking a pivotal moment in the region's history. The United Nations formed a special committee, UNSCOP, to study the issue. After months of investigation, the the committee recommended partitioning Palestine into two independent states, one for the Jewish people and one for the Arab people, with Jerusalem to be administered as an international city. This proposal, known as the UN Partition Plan or Resolution 181, was put to a vote in the UN General Assembly on November 29, 1947. The resolution passed with a two-thirds majority. While the Jewish leadership accepted the plan, seeing it as a historic opportunity, it was unanimously rejected by Arab leaders in Palestine and in neighboring countries who viewed it as a grave injustice. The vote set the stage for immediate conflict. Following the UN's decision, the situation in Palestine rapidly deteriorated into widespread violence. The period between the vote in November 1947 and the end of the British Mandate in May 1948 was marked by a brutal civil war. Jewish and Arab militias fought for control of territory, roads, and strategic positions. Both sides committed acts of violence and communities were torn apart. Jewish forces sought to secure the areas designated for their state under the partition plan, while Arab forces aimed to prevent the plan's implementation entirely. Civilians on both sides were caught in the crossfire, and hundreds of thousands of Palestinians began to flee their homes amid the escalating fighting and fear. On May 14, 1948, as the last British forces were preparing to withdraw, the Jewish leadership made a momentous decision. In the Tel Aviv Museum, David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish Agency, stood before a crowd and read the declaration of the establishment of the State of Israel. He declared the birth of a Jewish state in Eretz Israel, to be known as the State of Israel. It was a moment of profound joy and fulfillment for Jewish people around the world, the culmination of 2 millennia of hope and a century of struggle. The new state promised to be open for Jewish immigration and to foster the development of the country for the benefit of all its inhabitants. The celebration was short-lived. The very next day, on May 15, 1948, the armies of 5 neighboring Arab nations, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, invaded the newly declared state. Their stated goal was to destroy Israel and restore Palestine to Arab control. This marked the beginning of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, which Israelis call the War of Independence. The fledgling Israeli army, the Israel Defense Forces, was poorly equipped and vastly outnumbered. It had to fight a desperate war on multiple fronts for its very survival. The conflict was intense, with heavy casualties on both sides, as the new nation fought to defend its existence against overwhelming odds. The war lasted for over a year and involved a series of truces and fierce battles. Against all expectations, the Israeli forces managed to halt the Arab advances and eventually gain the upper hand. By the time armistice agreements were signed in 1949, Israel had not only survived, but had also expanded its territory beyond the borders proposed by the UN Partition Plan. The war had a devastating human cost. For Israelis, it was a hard-won victory that secured their independence. For Palestinians, it was the Nakba, or catastrophe, as it resulted in the displacement of over 700,000 people who became refugees in neighboring countries, creating a crisis that remains unresolved to this day. The creation of Israel had a profound and immediate impact on Jewish communities worldwide. For the first time in 2 millennia, there was a sovereign nation that Jewish people could call their own. It became a powerful symbol of rebirth and resilience after the devastation of the Holocaust. The new state immediately opened its doors and a massive wave of immigration began. In the first few years, hundreds of thousands of Holocaust survivors from Europe arrived, seeking refuge and a new beginning. At the same time, another wave of Jewish immigrants came from Arab countries in the Middle East and North Africa, where they faced increasing hostility and persecution in the wake of Israel's creation. Building a new nation from the ground up was a monumental task. The early years were defined by austerity, rationing, and immense economic challenges. The country had to absorb a diverse population of immigrants who spoke different languages and came from different cultures. It had to build institutions, develop an economy, and drain swamps to create farmland, all while facing constant security threats from its neighbors. This period required immense sacrifice and a collective sense of purpose. The government, led by pioneers like David Ben-Gurion, focused on defense, infrastructure, and agriculture, laying the foundations for the modern, technologically advanced country that Israel would become. The birth of Israel fundamentally and permanently reshaped the political landscape of the Middle East. It created a new non-Arab state in the heart of the Arab world, leading to decades of conflict and a series of wars in 1956, 1967, and 1973. The unresolved issue of the Palestinian refugees from the 1948 war became a central point of contention, fueling the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The story of Israel's creation is therefore inextricably linked to the story of Palestinian displacement. This dual narrative of national fulfillment for one people and national catastrophe for another is at the very core of the tensions that continue to define the region today. The story of Israel's birth remains incredibly relevant in the 21st century. It is a powerful example of a national liberation movement that succeeded in achieving its goals against incredible odds. Yet, it also serves as a stark reminder of the complex and often tragic consequences of creating new borders and nations, especially in lands claimed by more than one people. The ongoing debates about security, borders, settlements, and the rights of Palestinians are all direct continuations of the events that began in 1948. Understanding how Israel was created is essential for comprehending the deep-seated historical grievances and aspirations that continue to drive one of the world's most enduring and difficult conflicts.